Hi everybody, my name is Jens Larsen. You probably agree with me that one of the things that makes jazz harmony really beautiful is that we can make the sound of the chord really rich with extensions and alterations. In this video I'm going to show you first a basic set of drop 2 voicings that you can use if you want to play the song Autumn Leaves, and then I'm going to go over a few different versions of this, adding more and more extensions and alterations and different sounds, and that way show you of course how you work with adding extensions and alterations, but also give you sort of a practical idea about how these different things sounds, because adding really a lot of alterations and extensions can really make it more of a theory lesson and maybe something that you want to hear in a context where you know it, which is why Autumn Leaves is such a good example. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar, about improvising over chord changes, checking out some interesting arpeggios or chord voicings, then subscribe to my channel. If you want to make sure not to miss anything, then click the little bell notification icon next to the subscribe button. The first thing I'm going to do is that I'm just going to go over the basic drop 2 voicings that you need to play the first A part of Autumn Leaves, and those will be the chords without any extensions at all. And then the rest of the 5 different versions that I made, I'm going to talk about how I'm adding more and more color by adding extensions and alterations, where they're placed in the chord, how they work and where you get them from. And of course the last version is going to be so colored that maybe it's kind of hard to hear that it's Autumn Leaves. The first set of voicings are just the basic chords. There are no alterations, there are no extensions added. And that's really just because if we have this basic set down, then it's a lot easier to start molding it and finding some places where we can add chords and we have an idea about what the song really sounds like. It's good to go down to the basics for that reason. All the chords that I'm using here are in the beginning drop 2 voicings, and they're all found on the top string set. Now, the reason why I'm staying with the top string set here is because it's easier to add extensions if you don't go too low. If you're a little bit lower on the neck or lower in the string sets, then it can also become a little bit difficult to add the extensions without it getting muddy or without it sort of clashing with the lower basic part of the chord. The first chord is this C minor 7, and then F7, and then I move to this B flat major 7 up here. So of course when I'm down here I could have gone to this B flat major 7. But this voicing has the B flat on top and the A under it, and that's maybe not the most consonant interval, so we can just as easily move this voicing up to this B flat major 7, so that's what it is. Then we get this E flat major 7, A half diminished, then D7, and then a G minor 6. So here with the G minor 6, Autumn Leaves is in G minor. And when you're playing a tonic minor chord, so really the root of the key, then it makes more sense to make that into a tonic minor chord. And in jazz, usually that's a minor 6 or a minor major chord. So here I think the minor 6 is a little bit more working better as a resolution. It's a little bit more consonant. So that's why I'm using that one. I could have used like a minor major as well, but I think this works more as a resolution. So that's why I'm using that one. And then after that we get a G7 to take us back to the second A. In this second example I've started to add some 9s and 11s, and the way that really works is that if you want to add a 9 to a chord, then you take the original voicing. So if we take the C minor 7 here, now I want to have a 9 in here, so the 9 of a C is a D, and the easiest way to add that to the chord is to just replace the root with the 9th, and then that way I get this voicing. So that's also the first voicing that I'm using, so C minor 9, and then F9. So again, just this was the F in the original voicing. I'm now adding a G instead, so that's this voicing. And then the B flat major 7 with a 9. So here I'm actually now using what could have been this voicing and then replacing the B flat with a C, so I get this voicing. And then the closest E flat major 7 with a 9, that would be this one. So you could notice that when I'm playing an E flat major 7 with a 9, then in fact that's the same as a G minor 7, because I don't have to play the root anymore. So if you take an E flat major 7 like this, and then replace that, then the root with a 9, then you actually get a minor 7 from the third of the chord, so that's a G minor 7. Then the A half diminished, so that was the original voicing, and then I'm adding an 11, and I'm doing that by sort of substituting the third with the 11. And then we get a D7 flat 9, flat 13, that's this one. And G minor 6, 9. So again, identical to the original voicing, but now I just have, instead of the G, I have an A here in the voicing. And then we get a G7 flat 9, flat 13. And really with the G7 here, I started with this voicing in the last example. And then instead of the root, I add the flat 9. And instead of the fifth, I have a flat 13. Like this. On the A half diminished, I'm adding an 11 and not a 9. And the reason why I'm adding the 11 instead of another extension here is that the 9 that you would have in the scale, in this case, because A half diminished is a part of a cadence in G minor, then the 9 that we would sort of get out of that scale would be a B flat. And that's maybe not the nicest note to have at that point, so we get sort of this sound with the bass note if I play the bass note under it. So therefore I'm using another extension, that's the 11 here. The D7 that follows it, I also colored, and then I would kind of be taking this basic D7, and then I'm exchanging the fifth for a flat 13 and the root for a flat 9, then we'll get this. I think I forgot to mention that. As you'll see in the next example, you can use a natural 9 on an A half diminished, but in that way you start really to change the sound of the chord and also use a different scale in that chord, and in that way move a little bit away from the song. The third example is starting to add more extensions per chord. So for each of the chords we have 4 notes, and I want to keep, most of the time I want to have the third and the seventh intact so that you can really hear what chord it is. And then for the root and the fifth I start messing around with exchanging them for other notes to add extensions. And in the second example I was mostly just exchanging the 9 for the root. But of course you can also exchange the fifth with a 13 or an 11, and that's what I'm doing here in this third example. On the first chord, the C minor, so instead of playing a C minor 9, I'm now playing a C minor 11, which is a bit of a stretch maybe. But I have of course the 9, as in the previous one, and then I've exchanged the fifth with the 11 here. The D7 is turned into a D7 flat 9 13. So that's this sound. And that's really sort of a diminished sounding dominant, but that works really well in this context actually. Also because we have sort of the contrary motion of these two voices within the chords when I'm moving from C minor 7 to F7. Then I'm resolving that to this B flat, and that's a B flat major 7 with a 9 and a 13. So I think in the previous one we had this one, and now I've substituted the fifth with the 13. And I'm moving that up to this E flat major 7 with a 9. And now we get an A half diminished, and here I've chosen to, in this case, substitute the third with a natural 9, so a B. And in that way we're really changing the sound of what is happening at this point in the song. So that's this sound. So that's coming out of melodic minor. This is kind of a chord that's coming out of C melodic minor. You will also notice that when I have this top note in the melody, it doesn't actually fit. If you check the melody, then the melody here would be a C, so it doesn't really fit with the melody anymore. This is moving to D7 with a flat 9 and a flat 5. And this is coming out of the alter scale. Well, actually you can also see this as being out of the diminished scale, but I think in the context it sounds more like it's alter scale. And then I'm resolving that to a G minor major, so, and then also with an added 6 in there, or a 13. And then the final chord is a G7 sharp 9 flat 5, which is coming out of the alter scale. course, it's not only about which notes and which extension that we're adding to the chord, it's also about how we lay them out when we're playing the chord, so how we voice those notes when we're playing it. And sometimes when you want to add a lot of extensions and get a specific sound out on a chord, then it makes sense to also use other voicings, the drop 2 voicings, because they work quite well, but they are a little bit more connected to the more traditional jazz sounds. So that's also what I'm doing here in the fourth example. So the first voicing is this voicing for C minor 7, and this is really sort of an upper structure idea. So we have an E flat, which is just the third, and then the upper structure is an upper structure triad that's a B flat major triad in the second inversion here. And really this gives us a C minor 7 with, we have this sort of second interval that's really sort of a big part of the sound of this chord. And for the rest it has an 11, and here we have a 7th, and then we have a 9. So it's really just a C minor 7 with a 9 and an 11. And then I'm moving that into this F7, which is an F7 with a flat 13 and a flat 9. And that's just a drop 2 voicing. And then we get this B flat major 7 with a sharp 11. So again, this is kind of coming out of this B flat major 7 with a 9 that I really use a lot. That's one of my favorite voicings. But you can also exchange, in this case, the 5th with the sharp 11 to get this Lydian sound. And of course here we're really changing the sound of the song. There's no sharp 11 in Autumn Leaves at this point, but you can add it as a color if you want to. The B flat major 7 sharp 11 is voice led into an E flat major 7 with a 9 and a 13. That's this voicing. And from here I move into A half diminished, and now I have an A half diminished where I've replaced the third with the 11 and the root with the natural 9, so we have this sound. And this is going into altered D7, so that's this D7. And the D7 here is with a flat 5 and a sharp 9. And then I'm resolving that to this G minor major. Where here I'm taking away extensions from this chord, and I'm just playing a basic minor major, but because I want to really have this sound, so I'm using, instead of using extension, I'm just putting some chord tones next to each other, and in that way making the sound a little bit more interesting. And then I'm moving that into this G7 with a flat 9 and a flat 5. You can see that this G7 voicing is really just a D flat, so it's kind of like a tritone substitution, and you can of course also play it as that, but you can also just think of it as being a G7 with a flat 9 and a flat 5. The first 4 examples were really focusing mostly on still keeping the harmony moving and trying to make voicings that would sort of lead into each other. And here the last example, I'm really starting to work more on just considering each chord a sound and more of a modal approach. So I'm really just focusing on how does this chord sound and try to make that interesting, and a little bit less thinking about how I go to the next chord or how it really connects. And that's of course an option to do it like that as well. If you check out especially sort of the later Herbie Hancock, Tony Williams, Ron Carter, Miles Davis quintet period where they play standards, then this is really how they tend to treat most standards. And it's a nice way to also have another approach and to get some really nice colors out on top of the chords. So the first chord I'm playing here is a C minor with a 13. So that's a C minor with an 11 and a 13. You could look at this as being, well, basically coming out of this C minor 7, and then I replaced the 5th with the 11 and the root with the 13. And then that moves into this F7 altered. And the thing is, when you have a C minor with a 13, so the point of the C minor in terms of sort of functionally how a 2-5-1 moves is to delay the A, because the A is what's going to tell us that now we're on the F7. But if we put the A into the chord, then we're kind of ruining that part of it. But we can kind of compensate a little bit by just making the F7 really a dominant chord with a lot of alterations, so that you can still clearly hear that we're moving to sort of a next part of the progression. And that's kind of what I'm doing here. So that's also just why I'm ending up with this flat 5, sharp 9, F7. And that's just a drop 2 voicing. Then I move into, and here I'm playing an incomplete B flat major 7 with a sharp 11, and that's this one. And that's just root, sharp 11, major 7, and then a 9. And you could of course look at this as coming out of this chord and then changing the third into a 9 and the fifth into a sharp 11. But of course it's also one way to look at it, and also the way that it resolves is really just, we have this F7 and I'm resolving it actually up to a C7 13 almost, with a B flat in the bass. So that's the kind of sound that you get here. It's a really different sound. Then just to make the whole thing breathe a little bit, I'm just using a normal E flat major 7 with a 9 and with a 9 and a major 7. And then now I've changed 2 chords here, so I'm reharmonizing the cadence to G minor. And what I've done is I've added an extra 2/5. So I've added a B flat minor, E flat 7, and I'm playing it up here. So first this B flat minor 7 with an 11, and then turning that into an E flat 7 with a 9, and then moving up to, instead of playing an A half diminished, and also just sort of to take it a little bit further away, I'm using an A minor 7 with a 9, which really doesn't belong in G minor, which is also kind of the point here. And then moving that into a D7 with a flat 13 and a sharp 9. And that's actually kind of pointing back towards the G minor. And now my G minor chord, because that's really where we expect to resolve, I've changed that into sort of a G minor chord that we don't come across too often. And that's this voicing. That's a G minor 7 with a 9 and a 6. Sorry, it's a G minor 6 with a 9 and a sharp 11. And this is kind of coming out of D harmonic minor scales. So it's a really different sound, and I'm really just trying to create a surprise. This again is just coming out of thinking in terms of how can I color this chord to get that to stand out or really give it its own place in the progression, without thinking about how the harmony is really moving or whether it's a dominant or anything. It's just thinking about, oh, this is a nice color for a bar. And then I'm moving into this G7 sharp 9 with a natural fifth or a perfect fifth, and that means that this is probably coming out of a diminished type of sound. And actually this voicing is again a B flat first inversion triad over a B, so it's an upper structure, a triad upper structure. To me, one of the things that I find fun about playing jazz and comping behind other people is the fact that I can actually also work with coloring the chords in different ways. And of course it depends on the soloist, and it also depends on how you're playing the song. If you're playing Autumn Leaves as a slow bossa nova, then maybe you don't want to go sort of all out on the tonic minor sharp 11 chords. But at the same time, the fact that you have this freedom and that you can try and make that into sort of a musical statement behind somebody else and together with the rest of the rhythm section is something that I find really a lot of fun to do. I'm of course curious if you have a way of approaching this, because now I've gone over kind of 2 approaches, in the way that the first part of this is really about just different functions and really keeping the chords intact, and the second approach is much more just about looking at the chord and then finding some interesting colors. So how do you work with this? If you have some idea, if you have a certain type of tonic chord or one of the other chords that you really like that I didn't talk about, then leave a comment on that. I know a few that I didn't talk about that I use quite a lot, and maybe I can do that in another video. But I'm of course always curious what you guys think and what ideas you have. And in general, I find that there's a lot of useful information being shared on my videos in the comments. So if you found this video interesting, then that's definitely something you want to check out. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar and this is the first time you see one of my videos, then subscribe to my channel. The videos that I publish here every week are on finding some solid methods and good strategies to check out all the interesting things about jazz guitar and improvising. If you like this video and you want to help me keep making more videos, then check out my Patreon page. I'm very grateful for the support that I'm getting from my patrons, and it's because of that I can keep on making videos every week. If you join us over on Patreon, I can also give you something in return for your support. That's about it for this week. Thank you for watching, and on to next week.